This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Real Deal, with a very special guest today, Karen Stewart, who was longtime employee of the NSA until she began becoming concerned about what was going on around her, and they dropped the hammer on her. Karen, please tell us a bit about your background and experience.
All right. Well, I applied to the National Security Agency in 1982 and went through a rigorous background check, and they found my background to their liking and hired me on. And I became a foreign language intelligence analyst, which meant that I researched and translated foreign language material that was intercepted by the NSA and reported various intelligence aspects to the appropriate entities, maybe military, maybe federal government, and various other agencies, and sometimes even other countries with whom we had contracts in regard to intelligence sharing. So I did that for a number of years, and I ended up going to a directorate called the Weapons and Space Directorate, and I stayed there a while. And in 2002, we were ramping up to support Operation Iraqi Freedom. And I was doing some research and found, and I will tell you this is something that was in the paper, so I'm not telling you anything classified. But what I did was I found that a private Russian company was selling GPS jammers to the Iraqis, which were basically, and they were able to jam or disrupt the honing in signal of our missiles and our specialized weaponry that we were hoping to use to hit military targets that the Iraqis had moved and placed in between schools, mosques, inside neighborhoods, because they were trying to discourage us from destroying their defensive ability during our invasion by making it very costly. If we hit these military targets, then we might kill innocent people. So they put them among their own people, using their people as a shield. But our surgical strike capability with these missiles and things was such that people were not worried that they would have much collateral damage at all. But when these GPS jammers began being sold under the table to Iraq, the entire game changed, because this was disastrous and these things were highly effective.
Karen, what year was this taking place now?
Now, the Operation Iraqi Freedom was slated for January 2003. I did some research, and I was trying to do reporting and research in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. And in June 2002, I discovered the information concerning the private Russian company who was developing GPS jammers that were specific to our U.S. weaponry, and they were selling these GPS jammers under the table illegally to Iraq in order to thwart the invasion plan for January 2003. Well, the reports that I put out for 6 months enabled Weapons of Space and others to study these jammers and then come up with creative and effective countermeasures to their countermeasures. So the reporting and the ensuing program were highly successful. And I think if you remember back to 2003, the newspapers were filled with the fact that we invaded and took Iraq down with very few casualties. In fact, the Weapons and Space Management told me that their estimate was that my reporting had saved 2,000 lives or more of Iraqi civilians and U.S. military. So they were very happy with my reporting.
Excellent. Continue then. What happened after that?
Okay, so within by the time spring 2003 came around, awards and things like that started to come out, and there were group awards or individual awards, and everybody was quite happy, and my management kept telling me, well, you need to be put in for a promotion because what you did was extraordinary. And I thanked them, and I was very proud to have done it, and very blessed, I think, to have been given that honor to find it. So I bided my time, and the next year rolled around, and my branch chief put me in for a promotion for that work. And then she told me a few days later, she said, "I'm sorry, but somebody above me took you off the promotion list." I found that rather surprising because I'd gotten so much support and so much praise for the work. But, you know, who knows? Who knows why? And so I said, okay, well, maybe next year. And by the time the next year rolled around, it was almost promotion time again. And a promotion board member from the previous year came to me and she said, "Well, Karen, I wanted to ask you in regard to your reporting." She said, and she said, "Rita, what did Rita do on this project?" And I said, "Well, she did nothing. She actually was not on the project at all." And she said, "She didn't do," and then she named a bunch of things. And I said, "No, I did all that." And she looked very dejected, rolled her eyes, and she said, "Karen," she said, "the head of weapons and space and your technical lead lied to the promotion board and said that this was everything that Rita had done, and we gave her your double promotion."
Unbelievable.
And I was stunned, absolutely stunned. But I didn't know this woman. Now, granted, she sought me out and to ask me these questions, but I didn't know her, so I thought, well, maybe something's wrong and she's misunderstood something. So I started asking some questions, and suddenly the technical lead who had lied and helped these people steal my work screamed an accusation one morning as I walked into work to begin work. She said, "Karen, your article about NSA computers is in the Baltimore Sun." And she screamed this across the office, which we weren't even that close of friends. We didn't all that much care for each other. So I walked over there, I put my stuff down, went over to her desk, and I said, "What in the world are you talking about? First of all, I would no more write an article on NSA computers than I would write one on brain surgery. I'm not a technical person. I just tell people I'm a word person, you know? So I would not be able to write any type of article of any type of intelligence concerning NSA computers. As far as I was concerned, they're tools. And you do not write anything about NSA and give it to a newspaper without NSA's permission. You just don't." And so I went over to see this huge article that she was showing me, and I thought, well, maybe in her awkward way she's joking, and maybe there's a reporter named Karen Stewart, or, you know, something, maybe there's something I'm missing and it's a joke. And I looked, and there was nothing of that nature there. In fact, the article was so technical. I said, "I don't even understand this article." I said, what makes this my article? And after having screamed this accusation across the office, she whispered, "Oh, I'm just kidding." And I thought,
what a dirty smear on you.
Yes.
I mean, that's grotesque.
Yes. Purposeful.
Obviously,
Absolutely
clearly
purposeful.
intended to smear you in the eyes of everyone who within the sound of her voice.
Yes, yes. And what she meant to do was trick someone into calling security and reporting me for leaking information. So within 15 minutes, I was called by NSA security and told it was time for my routine polygraph. Well, it wasn't time for my routine polygraph. It was about 2 years early. But I knew somebody had to have called them up and reported me, and so they were demanding that I come for a polygraph. At that point, I was ticked. I really was ticked off. You know, I said, "Well, for Pete's sake."
You should have been.
You know. So I said, "Well, you know what? This disrupts my day. I have to leave the building, go all the way to the security building, take a polygraph. At least half my day will be gone." I said, "Okay, but I don't have anything to hide, so that's fine. I'm just, you know, miffed at being accused of something I never did by somebody who knows that I never did it, and then, you know, being scrutinized like that." So I said, "Okay, but fine." I went down there to the polygraph area of the security building, and a gentleman came out who said his name was Joe, and he took me back to the hallway where there are multiple exam rooms. And so we stood outside the door for probably about 3 minutes, and I thought, why are we standing outside this door? And there were continuing to be people coming back to take their polygraph, you know, an examiner and a subject. And so they'd go walk into a room, close the door, and some of them would be talking. And he waited until the very last person in the hall had gone into a room and there was nobody in the hall. And I thought, that's just strange. Why are we standing outside this door instead of going in? And as soon as he looked over my shoulder and looked around and noted that there were no other human beings in the hall, then he started screaming and threatening me.
What?
Yes, he started screaming at me and threatening me, and he was telling me, I've done over 2,000 polygraphs, and if you pull anything, I'm going to get you.
What the fuck?
And I was shocked. I was absolutely stunned because he did a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde on me. He was very professional.
He was trying to shake you up before the polygraph to get false readings that suggested you were being deceptive.
Exactly. That's exactly what it was. The woman, I think, was coached by security to scream the accusation because they were ready to sabotage a polygraph.
Right.
So I went down there, and that happened. We walked into the room, and of course, when you go in the room, everything's set up to record whatever you say, and then there's a two-way mirror to watch you that there isn't in the hall. So he did his abusive act in the hall, and we walked in, and the first thing I said to him was, what was that all about in the hall? And he said, what was what all about? I said, you know very well what it was. I said, you were screaming at me in the hall. I said, you don't do that before a polygraph. And he said, I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, you're kidding me.
I said, no. He was absolutely playing innocent for the two-way mirror and for the recording device.
How blatant can you get?
Yeah. So I told him, I said, look, I don't know what's wrong with you. I said, but I will be glad to come back tomorrow or next week and take the polygraph. I have no problem with that, but I don't want to take one from you, and I don't want to take one this minute because you have upset me, and that makes it impossible for me to get a polygraph result that's true. And he told me, he said, you take it now, or we're having the FBI take you down to D.C. to their headquarters.
Real power play. Real power play. This is just totally disgusting.
Oh, it's totally a setup. And I thought for a minute of telling him go ahead, but I thought, man, I could be stuck in Washington for days, in some kind of cell based on lies, So I said, all right, fine, I'll take it. I knew that was a mistake, so I went ahead and took it. And I flunked everything. I mean, I registered as lying about my name, so that was an absolute total fiasco. I got a call later in the week, and they said, well, you flunked it. And I said, well, no kidding. When your people scream at you, how are you going to pass? And nobody said a word. I had actually during that week called his supervisor named Ann, and I can't give last names, but I called his supervisor, and I said, what in the world is wrong with you people? This is what happened. And this is why I flunked the first polygraph ever. I said, if you look at my record, over 20 years of polygraphs, no problem, not even with one question. I said, this is outrageous. I said, this man needs to be disciplined or something. And she hung up on me. She wouldn't talk to me. So she wouldn't lodge a complaint, and she wouldn't talk to me.
They're part of an orchestrated campaign to smear you.
Exactly. So they said, okay, in a month you have to take a second polygraph. I said, fine. So in a month I went back, and the gentleman seemed to be on the up and up, and he said, what happened? And I told him, and he didn't really react. So we went through the polygraph, and I felt like I passed it, everything was fine.
This was a different polygraph operator, right?
Yes, it was. I would not have taken it from the same guy.
Right.
So the next month I went back and took it, and a week later, they called me up and said, well, we're calling it indeterminate. We want you to take a third polygraph. And I said, you're kidding. And they said, no, we're basically calling it indeterminate. Now, they didn't say I flunked it. They said it was indeterminate. And so I really thought, well, how could that be? But they said, okay, we have you slated to take your third and last polygraph, which means if you don't flunk this, if you
don't pass this one, you're out.
But if you flunk it, you're fired. And so they said, we're scheduling it for 3 months. And I think they do that to investigate you in the meantime, but I had no problem with people investigating me.
I can tell just from my conversation with you, you're clean as a hound's tooth. I mean, they picked the wrong guy to try to threaten and intimidate. This is disgusting.
Well, thank you. I've been kidded about making Mormons look bad. I've been kidded about making Mormons look bad. so, you know, I never did smoke or drink or do any of that stuff. So, yeah, there's just nothing you can blackmail me for. But like I said, I think they postponed it for 3 months to look into my background and maybe even surveil me or things like that. And so there was nothing. And so I came back in 3 months and went down to the security waiting room, you know, to wait for somebody to come out and get me, take me back to the exam room again. And as I was sitting there, a huge man who looked like a linebacker came over to me, and he was in a suit, and he was towering over me and trying to intimidate me. And
Sure.
he was saying things like, so this is the famous Karen Stewart. And I'm sitting there confused, like, who are you? And why am I famous? And of course, you know, they get you upset and confused. And then I'm supposed to go take a polygraph. So I really didn't even have time to respond to him when the woman who was the polygraph examiner came to the door, opened it, and said, you know, Karen Stewart, please follow me. And so I got up and went past him. And we went to an exam room, and she was looking through some paperwork, and she said, Mrs. Stewart, she said, I see nothing wrong in your background. She said, I have no idea what's going on here. She said, this never should have happened. She said, can we just talk before I give you this final exam? She said, because if you flunk it, you're out. She said, so let's just talk about this and see where it goes. I said, that's fine with me. So we actually ended up talking 2 hours.
You explained
and
to her
thank God.
You explained to her what was going on.
Exactly, everything I explained to her. And so that 2 hours actually gave me time to relax and forget about their attempt to intimidate me and ruin the polygraph yet again. So I took the polygraph, and she was packing up. I was packing up to leave. And she stopped me as I started out the door. She said, Mrs. Stewart, by the way, she said, I'm not even supposed to tell you this now. She said, but you just passed. There's no problem here. She said, there wasn't a problem with any of the questions here. And she said, in fact, the second polygraph you took, you passed that with flying colors as well. They just wanted to call it indeterminate to cause you to come back for a third polygraph so that we would have one abnormal polygraph balanced by 2 passes. She said, I think everything's going to be fine. And I was so relieved to hear that.
Yeah, but
so
Karen, she was a sincere person, and the powers that want to get rid of you are going to falsify everything. So there's,
yes.
You know, it's clear what's going to happen here.
Right, exactly. Well, I went back to my office, and I thought, I am going to transfer out of this office. They not only stole my work and stole my promotions, but now they're trying to get me put in prison to protect themselves from this gross breach of ethics. So I ended up transferring out, and I went to another office about 10 miles away and started my on-the-job training there. And by the time I got to probably about 6 weeks into it, I felt comfortable enough to contact the Inspector General and try to get him to investigate what had happened to me. And the liaison with the new office said, oh, this is exactly why we're here. He said, you know, get back to me with all the details, you know, time period, names, you know, exactly what happened. And so I worked on that for a day or two and then sent him an email.
Thinking this was sincere.
Well, I think he at the time was, but by the time that my email got to him and he consulted the IG, his attitude changed remarkably. In fact, I hadn't heard from him, and I called him up, and he said, oh, we're not interested in this. And I thought, well, this is a total about face. I said, how is it you're telling me you're not interested in this? Somebody just tried to set me up to send me to prison to hide it. And he said, well, I talked to the Inspector General, and he said, nobody cares about promotion problems. He said, because it's all subjective, so nobody cares why anybody gets promoted. And he said, and so we don't want to hear from you again. We're not interested. And I was absolutely, totally shocked.
Of course.
The next morning when I came to work, I saw this guy leave my new manager's office. And I thought, well, that's very strange. And I went and put my stuff down to start work. And my manager came out to me and she said, Karen, why are you pursuing this Inspector General investigation request. And I looked at her and I said, oh, I don't know, justice?
Yeah.
And so she, that's all I did. I just looked at her like, how in the world would you even ask that? So she turned around and went back. Well, apparently that was the start of a smear campaign.
A new vendetta.
Right?
A new vendetta.
Yes. Well, they were hiding this this theft of my work and promotion, but later on I found out that a woman transferred into the new office I was in who had been with me in that office for several years. And she said, Karen, did you not know that Rita was sleeping with almost every male in the Weapons and Space Directorate?
Oh, my God. This is the one they promoted over you?
Yes.
This is the one to whom they attributed your work?
Yes.
This is just disgusting.
Well, I questioned her further on it, and apparently the woman had been put in for promotion 2 times before that. The promotion board looked at her work and said, you've got to be kidding.
Right.
Do not even put this woman up for promotion. She is next to illiterate. She has done nothing. She is capable of nothing. Don't waste a space for this woman until she actually accomplishes something.
Right. And that's why they
accomplish
found your work was the perfect opportunity to seize, to promote her at your expense.
Exactly. And I always wondered, because they started the smear campaign in the new office, and they started stalking harassment. I couldn't believe it. And it's security goons, is what I call them, started to stalk me. They would be hanging out outside of my office door. They would follow me to the ladies' room. They would follow me to the lunchroom and then get a table as close as possible and lean over to make sure they knew that they were eavesdropping on me and whoever was sitting there with me eating and talking. They would follow me to, let's say if I went to another office to confer with someone, they'd follow me there and back. If I went to the drugstore that was inside the NSA complex, they would follow me there, wait outside, and then follow me back to my office as if there was something that I was going to do that was wrong. And they followed me to and from work. And they would hang out walking around my home on the sidewalk, to make sure that I knew that they were there, as intimidation. I thought, well, this is absolutely ridiculous. And
ridiculous.
so that continued from 2006 to 2009. Well, in early 2009, apparently they started getting impatient because they were trying to provoke me. And all I did was tell my friends what was going on. And, I didn't react to them. But in early 2009, they apparently got impatient. And so they started choreographing aggressive driving attacks on me from work to, from my home to work, trying to force me off the road, trying to cause me to have a accident. Yes. And they actually poisoned a pet dog. It was a beautiful Newfoundland, 13 months old, and they gave him a neurotoxin that made us have to put him down. It couldn't be cured. The damage was too vicious.
Oh, this is just
so
horrendous.
At that point. Oh, yeah. Just vermin. But, what's interesting to me, it made me think about the fact that a friend of mine named Vicky, who had worked in human resources, said that her job was to look over resumes and throw out anybody who had any type of problems, and especially serious problems like convictions for crime, mental illness, or anything like that. She just automatically threw them out. And she said that at one point, someone from security came to her and said, we don't want you to filter out the criminals and the insane people from the resumes that you forward to us. And she said, what? And they said, no, we want all of them. Don't throw away any of them. So she said, Karen, some of the worst people I've ever seen in my life were then hired by security. And she said, I couldn't even work in HR anymore because she said, I couldn't stand seeing who security was hiring because they were degenerates. They were pedophiles, they were criminals. She said, she said, I had to move. I had to just start a new job, in a new office. She said, I couldn't do that anymore. And so I said, this starts to make sense because I had spoken with Russell Tice, who you may be able to Google and see that he's a an NSA whistleblower who tried in vain to point out to them that there was a Chinese mole inside of NSA. And they attacked him viciously and fired him as well. So I spoke to him, and he said, oh, yes, under General Hayden, they promoted a security mid-level manager to a high position, and he's totally insane. He is a psychopath. And after that, everything changed. And he said that General Hayden had promoted this guy because what he wanted him to do was harass people into quitting, because at that point in time, the Congress had decided the Iron Curtain had fallen and everything's hunky-dory, everything's a bowl of cherries, we don't need NSA anymore, so let's eviscerate their numbers. And so General Hayden started to follow through with hiring people into security who would harass the workers into quitting. So this man was promoted to do that, and unfortunately, he has changed the entire face of NSA security forever. So those are the people that I was being attacked by, and I thought, this is insane. Why would they do this just because I asked for an investigation? I asked, why could I not be promoted for my own work and be given credit for my own work? Even if they wanted to save face, they could say, okay, well, you know what, we investigated and maybe things weren't done right. We're going to go ahead and give you your promotion. And I probably would have, and then not touched this woman, and I probably would have been happy, let it go, and kept working, and then retired, at 2 levels above what I retired at, and been happy. But for some reason, they were out to utterly destroy everything about me, my career, my reputation. And I finally figured out later that the woman was working for NSA security, and they wanted her to compromise these managers because they were blackmailing these people.
God, this is just a.
So that is why they came after me so viciously to utterly destroy me. And I will tell you, okay, in 2009, like I said, they started getting really nasty. And I went to my new management and I said, okay, here's the deal. This is what's going on. Dead dog, attacking, people attacking me as I drive. I said, this is not an investigation. I have offered up to them witnesses galore. In fact, my witnesses have begged NSA security to interview them. They have begged the Inspector General to interview them, and they are ignored. I said, and I keep being treated like I have done something wrong. I have done nothing wrong. I said, and this abuse and this criminal attack on me is outrageous. And so I told him everything about it, and I said, it needs to stop now. And so I went back to my desk, and 15 minutes later, NSA security called me, and it was the guy who was second in charge. His first name is William. And he called me down to an office, and he said, well, we're going to basically strip you of your top secret clearance because you've complained about people stalking and harassing you. So you obviously are paranoid and delusional, and you're unfit to have a top secret clearance. So we're going to take you out of NSA, and we're going to put you in the travel section where you're going to be able to just basically process travel papers, and we're going to decide your fate. And so I had to leave and go report to NSA Travel, and then they gave me a red badge instead of the top secret blue badge, and I started working there. And of course, I was more than furious, absolutely more than furious. And as I sat there working in the travel section, I started to notice across the parking lot that the men who had been stalking and harassing me for almost 3 years were reporting to the NSA security building across the parking lot from travel. So I started getting their license plate numbers, and I started, I draw, so I was starting to do characters of them, because you cannot have a camera or even a cell phone with you inside NSA because they don't want you reproducing anything using a camera or a cell phone camera. So I didn't have that available. So I started memorizing some of their faces and drawing them. And then I went to the Howard County Police and I said, these people have been stalking me. I want you to investigate. And I said, this has to do with illegal employer harassment. Well, the Howard County Police, I should have realized this, but the Howard County Police, of course, gets cop toys from NSA, and so they reported me back to NSA, and then NSA security basically came about a day or two later and said, well, we've decided that you're not only paranoid delusional, but you're potentially dangerous, so we're going to put you on administrative leave. And I just was flabbergasted. You know, how am I dangerous? But they said, well, you're dangerous.
You're dangerous to expose. You're dangerous in exposing the shenanigans inside the NSA.
Exactly. So they put me on admin leave, and I thought, okay, well, at least they don't have to go to this stupid job. And excuse me. And so they said, oh, by the way, we're marking you down as paranoid delusional, but we want you to get a second opinion. And we want you to find a psychiatrist or a psychologist and tell them that you want to be treated for being paranoid and delusional.
Oh, come on.
Yeah. And
that's setting you up to self-certify their allegations against you. I mean, yeah. How despicable is that?
Well, you know what? I was on the phone with my caseworker from security, and I said, you know what? If I have to get a second opinion, I will be more than happy to do so. But I sure as heck am not telling them that I'm paranoid delusional. I'm telling them that I'm being viciously harassed to cover up a sex scandal, and that your false accusation is that I'm paranoid delusional. And the professional can hear out my story and make up his own mind.
Yes.
So the woman on the other end was absolutely furious. She said, no, you're going to tell them that you're paranoid delusional and you want treatment for it. And I said, no, I'm not.
Well, how unbelievable that they're asking you to lie about yourself and your state of mental competence. I mean, this is just disgusting. Exactly. This is just disgusting, Karen.
Oh, yeah, it was. And it was astonishingly evil, you know. So I ended up calling about 20 psychologists and psychiatrists in the area, and I kept track of every single one of them that I called, and then I started receiving callback phone calls from people I never called. And so right. I would get somebody on the phone saying, oh, yeah, you called the office, and I think we need to get you right in. We need to get you in right away, and I want you to start taking these pills before you even come to see me.
Take these pills. That really would have induced paranoid behavior and beliefs.
Exactly. So thank God I kept a list of everybody I called and found that 2 or 3 of these people who tried this, I never called them.
Right.
I never called them. They were ringers for NSA.
Of course.
So I did end up finding a doctor, Dr. Rapp, who is a senior psychologist, and I went in, I told him, I said, here's my story. And so we started meeting once a week as I was on admin leave. And probably the third or fourth week, he leaned across the desk and he said, Mrs. Stewart, he said, if you were a paranoid delusional, he said, I just might have noticed by now. And then he started to laugh. And he said, this is clearly not what is going on. He said, but I do need a reason to speak to you and see you. He said, and I think with what they are doing to you, you need somebody to talk to. He said, so I'm putting down that you're suffering from anxiety disorder, from people trying to fire you for no good reason, and people stalking and harassing you illegally.
Excellent.
So they were absolutely furious when he started sending reports back to them saying there's nothing wrong with this woman except for being anxious because she's being falsely persecuted.
Right.
They were losing their minds. So he did end up talking to the psychologist, Dr. Wyszynski, who had threatened me when I made the IG complaint and told me that if I didn't drop the IG complaint, she would find something wrong with my previous psychological tests and that she would get me fired. So when he started talking to her...
This, Karen. This is outrageous beyond belief.
I think so, but the horrible thing is if they did this to me, I'm not the only one. I can't be the only one. They have to have done this myriad times because this seems to be their one-trick pony. You complain about anything, they send NSA security to stalk and harass you. Then when you complain about vicious stalking harassment, to include pet poisoning and killing, then they say, oh, well, you just think it's going on, you're paranoid delusional, and the one way that we can strip your top secret clearance easily is to say that you're crazy and to say that the nation is in danger and you cannot have this clearance. So that's their one-trick pony for getting around something called the No Fear Act. And Congress passed that to help whistleblowers so that they wouldn't be retaliated against and fired for reporting wrongdoing. But NSA and other agencies have decided that the way to get around that law is for them to attack you as psychologically unfit to hold your clearance.
Yeah, this is unbelievable. Where do things stand today, Karen?
Well, when I was put on admin leave in March of 2009, NSA decided they wouldn't have easy access to me if I were at home. So what they did was they went to the Howard County Police, and they told the Howard County Police that I was crazy and dangerous, and that they needed to rally neighborhood watch people and other people in the community to help them stalk and harass me. So that went on from April of 2009 to mid-July. By mid-July, I had found their meeting house. They were meeting weekly, and also different people were meeting daily, kind of in your face for intimidation factor. And I started talking to these people who thought they were 007 or, you know, God's gift to national security, walking around my house 5 times a day. And so I started telling them my real story. And I said, look, Columbia, Maryland, where I lived, is an NSA ghetto. I said, if you don't know somebody who works at NSA, then you know somebody who knows somebody who works at NSA. And I said, you start asking your friends, what happened to Karen Stewart? Did she do all this work and have it stolen from her? Was there a sex scandal involved that they're trying to fire her to cover up? I said, you ask. And within a short period of time, I started seeing the police coming to the weekly meeting house with sirens. And so apparently fights were breaking out in the weekly meetings they were using to basically control this group into group thought. You know, they would rally them for like a pep rally, you know, get the bad guy, get the bad guy. And then people started asking questions and started to figure out they were being absolutely lied to. Their time was being wasted, and the government was attacking somebody who had been a valuable asset and whose life's work had saved thousands of lives. So they quit. It was overnight. NSA and the Howard County Police had to call it off. And I would tell you that most likely the Fusion Center in Maryland has something to do with this. They seem to organize them into private entities so that if you try to send them a FOIA request, they simply refuse by saying, we're private, we don't have to answer that. So a lot of the dirty work is arranged by the Fusion Centers, and they, you know, make the payments to the civilians who are being used for proxy stalking and do all kinds of other things. But I thought the stalking harassment was over at that point. I did file a lawsuit against NSA that went to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission in Baltimore. Sorry, I had to get a drink.
Sure.
And so it's been sitting there waiting for adjudication since January 2010. Now, we had asked the NSA to investigate, you know, based on an EEO complaint, that they were discriminating against me based on a mental illness I never had. So they flubbed the investigation, refused to do it correctly, and then tried to get out of it. And the judge saw through it and said, nope, I'm taking this case because I've never seen anybody screw up an EEO investigation as badly as you did. You didn't even put down the right premise upon which the lawsuit was lodged. You know, they said, NSA investigated, went to different people saying, did you discriminate against her because she's white?
Good God.
And when we saw that paperwork,
Good God, Karen, this is so flimsy. This is so desperate. This is so amateurish. God.
Well, it was interesting that the woman who headed NSA EEO was married to a high-ranking security manager.
Yes.
So he told her, don't investigate. So they took our complaint that I was being railroaded out based on a mental illness that I never had.
He told her don't
and changed it to, yes.
He told her don't investigate in order to protect NSA.
Exactly. So they investigated and found themselves totally innocent of all charges. And at that point, like I said, the EEO judge said, oh, no. He said, people don't make mistakes like this. This is outrageous. Because they had first refused for the 90 days that they had to investigate. And then they told the judge, oh, we forgot. Now, by law, once you lodge an EEO complaint and ask for investigation, the agency has to investigate within 90 days. But their answer was, we forgot.
Just ridiculous.
Oh, outrageous. And so the judge said, and I was disappointed with the judge because my lawyer said, look, we want a summary judgment against these people.
Yes.
Because they're not doing what they're supposed to do. But unfortunately, he said, no, let's give them a chance to investigate. We told them you've got another 90 days. And so they falsified the paperwork saying that I had claimed that I was basically being fired because I'm white, which had nothing to do with anything. And so when they did that, he said, okay, I give up. I'm accepting the case for my review and judgment. And that was January 2010, and it's been sitting there, unfortunately, ever since. So I don't know whether they really, truly are that backed up, or whether NSA has told them shelve it and just stall.
Yeah, clearly that's what's happened, Karen. There's any doubt about it. I mean, this deserved a declarative judgment dismissing the suit against you with prejudice. I mean, the whole thing is completely ridiculous.
It is. And like I said, the fact that the woman was sent by NSA Security to compromise management horrified me. I said, dear God, NSA is totally compromised. It is not working for us. If they have infiltrated the security personnel, which clearly they have, and they are using their positions to blackmail NSA managers into giving them secrets that they should never have access to, then who is behind this? Are they selling it for themselves to enrich themselves? Or are they in bed with the Chinese or the Russians? I don't know. I mean, they could be freelance agents just selling whatever secrets they can for whatever money they can.
You're looking in the wrong direction. This has nothing to do with Russia or China. This has to do with Israel. This has to do with the complete domination of our intelligence agencies by the Mossad. I mean, Karen, really, seriously, you shouldn't be thinking about China or Russia. They have nothing to do with it. Totally internal. Totally within the United States. Totally a reflection of the corruption of the Barack Obama administration. Something that would continue in spades under Hillary Clinton, by the way.
I think so, too.
It's just outrageous.
But anyway, it is. But this is phase one. So we go on to phase two. All right. Remember, I told you that the stalking harassment stopped mid-July 2009 when people found out they were being blatantly lied to. So in late October 2010, after a hearing that the psychologist I hired went to with me, he presented his case. He said, "There's nothing wrong with this woman. I would feel very proud to have her have a top secret security clearance. In fact," he said, I would rest easy knowing people like she had these types of clearances." And so he presented a very good case, and the NSA security psychologist was able to sit in on the meeting. And then when it came for her turn to present her case, they told us we had to leave. We couldn't hear what she had to say.
Well, How can you not hear the evidence against you?
Yeah, exactly. So we were forced out, and then I received a letter a week later saying I was fired. And I told the psychologist, and I think he took it harder than I did. I expected it, and he said, "Are you kidding me?" He said, "How?" He said, "I've got 40 years of experience. I'm in high demand for cases all over Maryland." He said, "I am a recognized expert, with this type of testimony." He said, "How could they fire you after we proved nothing they were saying about you was true?"
Had you brought out? Yeah, go ahead.
I had to comfort him. I mean, he just was devastated. And I said, I expected it. I said, they're not honest. And so, that was that. They fired me. They sent me paperwork saying, okay, now that you're fired at 28 years of service and instead of 30, then you have to get deferred federal retirement. So you'll be getting your retirement when you're age 62. At that point, I was 54, so that left me 8 years of no income whatsoever. And I knew from Russell Tice that once they do this to you, you're blackballed and you can never get another federal job. So I started to fight them, and I investigated, and some friends helped.
Yeah.
Yes, are you there? Okay.
Yeah,
and
go
so
ahead.
Some friends helped, and one of them told me, she said, there's something called discontinued service retirement. And I said, no, I haven't heard of this. And she said, yes, it's for anyone who is over the age of 50 and who has served in the federal government for over 20 years, and they find their job disappearing.
Yes.
And she said, and it's for somebody who is losing their job, not because of anything wrong that they've done and for no fault of their own. Like they're not guilty of bad behavior. They're not guilty of bad performance. And she said, that fits you exactly, because they're saying that they have to fire you because you're mentally ill. And if you're mentally ill, that's not something you can help. And I said, oh, you're right. So I called the Office of Personnel Management, and I got a hold of a manager there, a mid-level manager, and I told him my story. And he said, you know what? He said, I'm going to go to bat for you. He said, because if they're going to tell me they don't want you to have discontinued service retirement, they're going to have to tell me we didn't fire her for the reason we're saying.
Good.
And he said,
it's so
I doubt
nice
they'll
to
do
find,
that.
Karen, it's so nice to find someone, a principal. In all this mess, you're being dealt with so badly. It's nice to find someone, a principal.
Oh, he was a godsend. I could not believe I found him. He was absolutely a godsend. He said, look, they just fired you, right? So you don't have access to the building. I said, yes. He said, so I'm going to go to bat for you. He said, they need to send me paperwork for discontinued service retirement that has not been included in your termination packet. He said, I'll get back to you. So he talked to them, and first NSA, when I said, why didn't you include discontinued service retirement paperwork? They said, that doesn't exist. I said, yes, it does. No, it doesn't. And I said, okay, I want to speak to a supervisor. And the supervisor came on. I said, all right, according to the CSRS retirement manual, and I'm under CSRS retirement, on page 42, they talk about discontinued service retirement. I said, I fit. It is something that I'm eligible for because everything about it fits my situation. And he said, oh, that doesn't exist. I said, all right, then you pick up the manual and you go to page 42. What do you see? And I think he did that. He said, this doesn't apply to you. I said, how does it not apply to me? And he said, well, I'll get back to you. And so later on, he said, well, I spoke to the Consul General, and the Consul General said, you're not eligible unless he says you're eligible. And I said, no, the manual says these are the reasons you can get a discontinued service retirement. It doesn't say it's dependent on somebody's whim. And at that point, I contacted OPM because they were lying to me, trying to cheat me out of my retirement as well. And so I told the OPM guy the whole story. He got to NSA. They gave him the same type of guff, and he pulled rank on him. He said, look, we handle all retirements. He said, you will send that paperwork, and you'll send it now. And I won't have any more of these excuses. This is not your purview. This is mine. And so he actually got the retirement for me, which was at a GS-12 level slightly reduced because of the 2 years under 30 years, but at least I had income coming in.
What had,
So I ended up.
what had your GS level been at its highest rank? 14?
Well, I should have been promoted to GS 14.
Yeah.
That's what the woman who stole my work was promoted to.
So you're talking about the one, of course, who'd been banging everyone in the office to make her way up the ladder, that they benefited by giving her credit for all of your good work.
Yes.
Just disgusting beyond words.
It is. I mean, I just was shocked at the utter betrayal of it. But like I said, that was phase 1. Phase 2 was after I got my retirement. I told my husband, who's, we've been up there 30 years, I said, look, I'm going to go down to Florida 6 months every year until you retire and this whole lawsuit is settled. I said, because I don't even want to see my neighbors because I'm going to slap them for being so stupid. You know? So I said, so I'm going to go down to Florida. My parents are still alive. They're in their 80s, so I'm going to stay with them half a year, see what I can do to help them, and then come back, So I came down here for 6 months in 2011, 12, 13, 14, got here in 2015, and was able to find out the name of one of the NSA executives who actually had broken into my home after I made the Inspector General investigation request. And he had stolen all extra keys to the house, cars, and mailbox. And he had bugged the house. I talked to Russell Tice a while about some of the things going on inside the house that we were noticing with the cable, the phone, and actually even the TV. And he said, oh, yeah. He said, they bugged you. He said, they're not trying to find out what you did wrong or catch you doing something. They're trying to find out how much you're figuring out that they're doing to you.
Right.
So,
right.
How much does she know? How much does she know? How much has she figured out? So, and I described to him, I said, well, in the middle of the night between 12 and 6 a.m., I'm hearing a electronic sound. It's like, I said, it can last like 5 minutes to 20 minutes. I said, and it follows somebody being outside my bedroom window and being near the cable box. And he said, oh, yeah, they're downloading a burst bug. And I said, well, what is that? He said, what they usually do is they take a burst bug and they put it in your vent system somewhere because it has excellent acoustics. And then it passively records every single thing that you say in the house, in every room. And then they come, because they have to be in proximity to it, they come near it, download it, go back and examine every word that you've said. He said, so it records about 24 hours. They download it, and then it records another 24 hours, self-erases, and then basically, they download it, so it's ready to go again another 24 hours. And so that's another adventure in itself, me trying to catch that guy. But anyway, I went down to Florida after all that garbage and figured out one of the executives who had come into the house and did all that. And I asked my lawyer in Atlanta to subpoena corroborating evidence identifying him through the Maryland Motor Vehicles Department. I said, I saw him leave the house, and then I saw him at NSA 2 days later, and I said, and I drew him, because I can't have a camera inside NSA, but I drew him, and that seemed to upset people when I showed his picture and said, do you know who this man is? And so NSA security got real upset that I was able to reproduce faces. That's
wonderful, Karen. Wonderful.
Well, I knew they were upset because every so often when I walked through NSA, somebody would see me coming down the hall and hide his face. And if that doesn't scream guilt, I don't know.
Of course.
I don't know what does. So that would make me laugh. But anyway, so I told my lawyer, I said, I think I know who this is. Ask them for the paperwork on so-and-so. And when she did, I found myself being stalked and photo-stalked in Tallahassee, Florida, where I had moved. And I thought, is this really starting again after 5 years? And so I noticed 2 teams of men photo-stalking me. One would drive, the other one would take pictures, and they would stop wherever I stopped and then follow me around taking pictures of me. Well, I took pictures back.
Good.
And so the two teams basically had cars with Panama City dealership logos, and I said, okay, Panama City. That means that these guys who look military but in civilian garb, they must be Navy. They must be from the Naval Security Group in Pensacola. And so that was the premise I went on. And I investigated, and during the time which I had been away from NSA, the Naval Security Group co-located to Fort Meade, Maryland with NSA. And I said, okay. So they have a connection there. And within probably a couple weeks, I noticed that I had real civilians stalking me. In fact, they would sit on two nearby streets, and if I left to go anywhere, one would race ahead to impede me, and the other one would tailgate me, in an effort to intimidate and make it very obvious that I was being corralled, and followed. And so I said, okay, here we go again. They've got proxy stalkers. And so I ended up trying to get a Freedom of Information Act state level from the Sheriff's Department, because I live outside city limits. And they demanded like $2,000 to even look for the information that I asked them, so I couldn't possibly do that, and I thought that was outrageous. But one of the deputies admitted to me, he said, NSA came to Tallahassee in early 2015, and it seemed to be right after my subpoena, my attempt to subpoena information, and they set up here for a secret exercise. I said, oh, really? And so that corroborated the fact that NSA would indeed bother to send people to Podunk, to Tallahassee, and set up yet again another stalking harassment campaign, because I had dared subpoena corroborating evidence identifying an NSA executive who had illegally broken into my house and bugged it. So they had these people scared out of their wits. They obviously had to tell them that I was a spy or a crazy person or something of that nature, because the people following me, if you said boo to them, they just about wet themselves. So, but it was annoying, but I had gone through it before, and this went from April 2015 until late November 2015, just the regular stalking harassment 24/7. And in that time period, I had a Twitter account, and I still do, and I said, all right, if you dirtbags want to do this to me for merely me exercising my right to sue you, then I'm going to do an interview, radio blog interview, and write out the transcript of what I know about 9/11. I don't know a lot, but what I know is significant. I came into the building 2 days after 9/11, and there was a man standing in the hall near my office, and he was crying like a baby. And I thought, well, this poor man has lost somebody, or it could be just a trauma, because it was horrific, absolutely horrific. And so as I was passing him, there were 2 or 3 women comforting him, so I didn't really stop to do anything until I heard him sob, nobody had to die. And I stopped. And he continued. He said, not one of the people had to die. We had all the information that we needed to save every one of them, to put an end to this plot. He said, but they wouldn't let us report it. They told us if we dared try to report it, that they would take disciplinary action against us, even firing us. He said, we could have saved them all, but they wouldn't let us report it. And he kept going on, and eventually the women basically escorted him to his office, and he started to get a hold of himself and quit crying. But I was in absolute horror. And I said, dear God, don't let this be true. And I waited for something to come out to find out what really happened. And then I saw NSA management and people going to Congress saying, well, it's all your fault, basically, that pesky Constitution got in our way. Not our fault, we missed it. You have to give us more money, and you have to let us trample the Constitution, or something like this will happen again. And that was balderdash.
Of course. Of course. We did 9/11. Even the Saudis have declared that on 9/11, the United States attacked the United States. It was compliments of the CIA, the neocons in the Department of Defense, most of whom are dual U.S.-Israeli citizens, and the Mossad, Karen. I've done a great deal of work on this subject. I just published my second book on 9/11 that blows the whole case out of the water.
It's horrible. It's horrible. And yesterday morning, I watched yet again more videos from 9/11, and I found myself just crying just as heavily as I did that day.
Yeah,
you know.
Karen. Well, listen, you're a wonderful person with immense integrity, great courage, a true American patriot. I admire you beyond words. I want to get this out to the American people as quickly as possible, Karen. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, I would tell you that when I told you that the stalking went from April 2015 to November 2015, it didn't stop. But what happened in November 2015 was that I had a fight with Bill Black, who was the deputy director of NSA during 9/11. He basically attacked me on Twitter as a liar, and I told him, no, I was there and I can prove it. And he erased all of our conversations. And 3 days after that, I started getting hit with something called electronic harassment.
Yes.
And my family and I have been hit with that 24/7 since November 2015. And that is directed energy weapons
Yes,
that have been
yes.
miniaturized.
Psychotronics.
Yes.
They're doing it a lot. I have a friend who's been under constant attack. Someone else of my acquaintance has been viciously assaulted. These are whistleblowers. We have become so corrupt, Karen, that the truth is the enemy of the American government.
Yes, it is. It is. Well, I will tell you, it's not just whistleblowers. What I found out in the past few months is that they are testing these weapons on random Americans, and while they got a group of people who are random, and so nobody believes them, because everybody says, well, why would the United States government waste all that time and effort on a school teacher, on a bus driver, on a CPA?
And it's because they're test subjects. They're test subjects.
Yes.
They're random test subjects. I mean, this is experimentation. I mean, those who are asking the questions, of course, have a reason for asking them, but they don't understand the dimensions of the evil that we confront here.
No, they don't. And it's almost unfathomable, but I will tell you that all of these people have very similar experiences. I mean, it's come onto them out of the blue. The contractors even throwing in people they have vendettas against, saying, oh, I want you to do this to Bill Smith because he got the contract I wanted, or I want you to do this to my ex-wife because she dared divorce me, or, you know, and they're throwing whistleblowers in among these people so that the whistleblowers will not have the voice they should, because they're thrown in with a group of people that they are working 24/7 to present as paranoid and delusional. Well, I will tell you that there is no such thing as mass delusion. And some of the estimates say that there are 600,000 Americans who are being randomly tortured to death to test out these directed energy weapons. And you can see that they were used in Iraq during the airport battle in Fallujah. And you go and you can find on YouTube testimony by Iraqis who were related to some of these soldiers who the United States government melted.
Yes.
They melted them.
Yes.
They went down to skull, teeth, and bits of tissue, and that was it. And so the Americans went in and took up 2 inches of topsoil and all of the deformed bodies and put them somewhere secret.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want people to know they had illegally used directed energy weapons that are not approved by the Geneva Convention.
Yes. Yes. The United States is committing war crimes all over the world, Karen.
Well, and even on our own soil. I mean, there's no excuse for it anywhere, but to turn on your own people and to use these weapons at low level. I mean, people would notice if you turned into a skull with bits of tissue. So they're using these weapons now at a lower level, 24/7, to see what diseases and disabilities their targets develop and how quickly they can kill them at what low rates. Because they're giving people cancer, brain tumors, you name it, heart attacks, strokes, because electromagnetic radiation wreaks havoc with the body.
Yes.
And you get poisoned. You get poisoned from it, and there's going to be a catastrophic cell a situation that causes a heart attack or disease of some type at some point after you've been in these waves 24/7 for months or years.
Yes.
You're going to die of something that you never would have died from before.
Yes. Yes. Karen, you nailed it. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your coming forward and speaking with me today. I admire you beyond words, and I'm going to do everything I can to get this out to the public, Karen.
Thank you, and I admire you for being there for us to talk to, because if people like you didn't take a chance, then we would have no voice.
This is Jim Fetzer thanking my special guest, Karen Stewart, for being here. She's shown great courage and integrity in speaking out about the abuses by the NSA, which is supposed to be protecting Americans, but in fact is protecting the government from truth. And all of you for watching.